students were asked to reflect on what pronouns they want to use. And they were given a gender wheel worksheet that has different identities like trans, intersex, drag king, trans femme, agender person, girlish boy, boy girl, and non-binary. It introduces children to they and ze pronouns and also tree pronouns, and teaches kids that, quote, ways of thinking are changing all the time as old limited beliefs transform and evolve.
So that's the gender wheel. And it's just one example of the early sexualization of children being pushed in public schools everywhere. And this seems to be spreading. Where did this come from? Well, there are all sorts of explanations, all sorts of reasons we can look at over the course of the past decades and centuries. But a couple of people I want to focus on in these episodes are two men in particular, whom I call the architects of perversion, really the fathers of radical gender ideology. One of them is John Money, whom we will focus on in another episode. And this one in particular, I want to take a look at Dr. Alfred Kinsey. Dr. Alfred Kinsey is known as being the father of the sexual revolution. He is hailed by Hollywood and other liberal elites as a pioneer in the field of sexual research and a bit of a champion, a champion of homosexual rights and a bit of a hero, really. His work is still taken seriously. There's the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. The Kinsey Institute itself is officially a consultative body at the United Nations. And so Dr. Kinsey is still being put forth as a legitimate and respected researcher and scientist in the field of sex research. But at the end of the day, not only was he a fraud, he was truly an architect of so much of the perversity that we see today. And we can very much lay the blame squarely at the feet of Dr. Kinsey for the sexualization of our children that we're seeing today. I'm going to go into all of that, but warning, we're going to be talking about some adult content in this show, so it's not appropriate for children, nor should people who are very sensitive to the topics of child sex abuse watch this program, because we will be discussing some disturbing material as well involving child sex abuse and the research that Dr. Kinsey was involved in. So I'm just giving fair warning to viewers out there right now. All right, before we get into all of that, just a reminder that you can still sign up for our autumn retreat at sea. That's going to be in September, ports of call along the New England coast. But also remember that we've got our winter retreat at sea 2024. That's going to take place February 4th through 11th. And that is going to be in warmer climes. In the Western Caribbean, we'll be taking off from Port Galveston, Texas, and visiting Mexico, Belize, Honduras over the course of 7 days. So for those who are stuck in very, very cold weather during that time, like us here in Detroit, that would be a very nice retreat to take in warmer weather, fellowshipping with like-minded Catholics, Holy Rosary every single day, confession, adoration, Holy Mass, and of course some wonderful talks, compelling talks by Michael Voris. To sign up for the winter 2024 retreat at sea, just go to churchmilitant.com/retreat at sea winter 2024. That is churchmilitant.com/retreat at sea winter 2024. All right. I showed you the gender wheel. Let's take a look now, very quickly, at the gay BCs. That's what they're called, the gay BCs. And this is actually a mother teaching her son the gay BCs. Let's take a look.
A is for ally. B is for bye. C is for coming out. D is for drag. E is for equality. F is for family. Uh-oh, we missed the page. G is for gay. H is for hope. I is for intersex. J is for joy. Prolifically. K is for Kiki. L is for lesbian.
So like I said, all of this is proliferating everywhere, not just in our schools, but even in our homes, as we see, with mothers actually teaching their children this sort of thing, which is, as far as I'm concerned, child abuse. Where does it come from? Well, like I mentioned, Dr. Kinsey, he has his handprints over all of this. Let's take a quick look at the soundbite from Dr. Judith Reisman, who did stellar work in exposing the truth about Dr. Alfred Kinsey.
And of course, it was the foundation of all the changes in our laws, the sodomy laws, the abortion laws, everything else. I mean, he's there. His handprints are on everything that deals with sexuality.
So let's take a quick look at the background here. Kinsey was born in 1894. He died in 1957. And like I said, he was considered a leading expert on sexuality. He was raised a Protestant, Puritan, I believe. He had a domineering, tyrannical father, traits that were actually carried over to Kinsey himself, who also came to be known as very domineering and tyrannical, even a megalomaniac. He remained a virgin until age 26. He got married and wasn't able to consummate the marriage for until a few months later. He graduated from Harvard with a degree in biology, and his original focus was studying wasps. He studied wasps. In 1938, he decided to change the focus of his study from wasps to human sexuality. And he started out his research by first collecting the sex histories of his students. Take a moment to think about that. Let's say you're an undergraduate female student, okay? Young, 19, 20, 21. And your older male professor approaches you and basically asks you to tell him your sexual history, your sexual escapades. What would your reaction be? Get lost, pervert. Pervert. I'm not going to tell you that. But he did it under the guise of scientific research. I'm doing this for scientific research. And that's how it started. He started hearing stories from his young students about their sexual histories, their sexual escapades. He wrote them all down. And in 1940 is when he officially switched over from biology, zoology, all of that, towards studying the human sexuality full-time and officially. And as I mentioned, Dr. Judith Reisman has done stellar work, pioneer work in really exposing the truth about Dr. Kinsey. Let's take another look at a soundbite from this report featuring Dr. Reisman.
The turning point for all that was Dr. Alfred Kinsey, his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, 1948. He was the father of the sexual revolution and therefore the father of everything that has come from that.
So in 1947, Dr. Kinsey founded the Institute for Sex Research at Indiana University, something that continues to this day. It's still there today. Like I mentioned, the Kinsey Institute has a consultative status at the United Nations and the UN. It was very controversial when that was granted, extremely controversial. There were a great many objections from individuals, including from one of Kinsey's victims. We'll get into that in a little bit. In 1948, he published the book Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. This book sent shockwaves throughout the American public because it took a peek basically into the bedrooms of what he claims were average Americans, okay? And people were shocked by what they learned. According to this book, 800 pages long, he interviewed 18,000 people. And this is what Dr. Kinsey found, okay? 90% of men had engaged in masturbation. 85% of people had engaged in premarital sex. 70% of men had sex with prostitutes. 37% had some sort of homosexual experience. 17% of farm boys had engaged in bestiality. 10%, he says, of males are homosexual. 95% of males engaged in some sort of immoral or illegal sexual activity. Those statistics back in 1948 absolutely shocked the American public. 95% of men engaging in immoral or even illegal sexual conduct. 95% of men. Shocking statistics. Here's the problem. The people that Kinsey chose to interview, it was not your average, ordinary American citizen. And Kinsey himself had a very specific agenda, as we will go into. Kinsey, throughout his entire life, experienced same-sex attraction. According to one biographer, he may have experimented with some of his homosexual desires when he was in the Boy Scouts or YMCA as a teen. He engaged in a great deal of masturbation and had these homosexual desires. Kinsey said this, okay? This is what Kinsey said at the time that his book was published. Quote, "It is my conviction that the homosexual is biologically as normal as the heterosexual." That's what he said. But here's the thing. He had the agenda, and this is admitted to. This is admitted to by biographers and including by people who hail Kinsey as a hero. Kinsey was on a crusade to normalize homosexuality. He himself was a homosexual secretly. He wanted it to be normalized. And that was his agenda. He needed to prove to himself that he was not deviant, but normal. And by doing that, the way he did that was he tried to make it appear as if the vast majority of men are engaged in so-called deviant sexual behavior. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Real Estate for Life. Are you looking to buy or sell a home? Maybe you want to move to a more family-friendly place. Real Estate for Life can help you with that. I myself have used them twice, once to sell a home, another time to buy a home. In both cases, they paired me with a professional who shared my values, plus he gave a cut of his commission to a pro-life charity of my choice. Real Estate for Life is a multinational company that connects pro-life home seekers with realtors and professionals who share their values. When you buy or sell a home with Real Estate for Life, the agent will give a share of his commission to the charity that you have chosen. So for instance, on a house worth $180,000, approximately $1,000 of that will go to the pro-life charity of your choice. And that's all without costing you a penny. It really is a win-win. So to connect with a pro-life realtor, please go to realestateforlife.org. That's realestateforlife.org. His research included cruising gay bars and gay hotspots in Chicago, singling out, targeting, interviewing homosexuals in particular to ask about their sexual habits, asking them to fill out these questionnaires. He himself engaged in anonymous sex during his so-called research, cruising these gay spots and gay bars. He himself had a lot of sex with anonymous strangers during that time. Another thing that was later revealed was that criminals comprised at least 20% of his interviewees, and a very large portion of those criminals were sex offenders. 1 in 5 of his interviewees were convicted criminals, and a large portion of them were sex offenders. So naturally, the results are going to be skewed. Naturally, those numbers of people engaging in immoral or illegal criminal sexual conduct, obviously it's going to go up because of the criminals that he interviewed. But he didn't reveal this to the public. And so the public is left thinking, oh, wow, really? The average American male is engaged in all this behavior? 10% of homosexuals, in an American public? Well, as we know, that's simply not true. There have been more recent studies done that show that only 1% to 2% of the population identifies as homosexual. Now, in the past few years, that number has gone up because you have this huge wave of LGBT being normalized in the culture now and being pushed and pushed and pushed upon our children, such that they are now, a larger percentage of them now are left thinking, oh, well, gee, I think I'm homosexual. So the numbers have gone up, but because of this deliberate sexualization of children of our culture. But before that time, you had numbers like 1% to 2%, nowhere near what Kinsey claimed. Let's read what Dr. Janice Krause has to say. People don't realize the people in Kinsey's studies were not normal, average Americans. They were prostitutes, criminals, the only folks willing to be involved in such slimy research. It was not legitimate research at all. It has been one of the biggest hoaxes perpetrated against the American people in our history. Now, let's take a look at Dr. Kinsey himself. He actually fell in love with one of his students. His name was Clyde Martin, a young male student that he loved, but Kinsey led an extremely bizarre, perverse private life. He allowed his wife to sleep with multiple individuals. And so he actually encouraged this kid that he fell in love with, Clyde Martin, to satisfy his wife sexually. So this kid was sleeping with his wife, Clara. And other men were sleeping with Clara with the encouragement of Alfred Kinsey. He actually, he got sexual pleasure hearing about people's sex lives. He was getting aroused listening to people's sex lives. And then he ramped it up to observing them engaging in sexual behavior. He would get it on film. He was a voyeur. He loved to watch people being involved in sex. And then he himself became a participant observer. He himself would participate in these sexual acts as they were being researched, conducted, and filmed. And he would be sleeping with both men and women. He encouraged his staff at the Kinsey Institute to sleep with one another. It was essentially a free-for-all. In fact, he slept with almost all of his staff, both men and women alike. According to his right-hand man, Kinsey, basically, he just slept with everybody. He slept, and he encouraged that environment at the Kinsey Institute. Like I mentioned, his wife, Clara, slept with her husband's lovers. And the strange thing, too, is that he would have an attic where he would film some of these sexual acts, where orgies would be held. And when it was all done, his wife, Clara, would come up with persimmon pudding and milk and cookies for everyone. It's just, the whole thing is just completely, utterly bizarre. As professor at Indiana University, he would go on field trips. He would encourage his young male students to strip naked. He would encourage them to do that. He would encourage them to watch porn. And he just basically gained the reputation of kind of being a dirty old man, because that's exactly what he was. He was a dirty old man. He blamed Christianity for all the repression that people were experiencing in society. He claimed celibacy was a cultural perversion. So he's not the one engaging in cultural perversion. He's not the one who's deviant. It's the celibates, like the Catholic priests, or the people who choose to abstain before they get married, the people who choose monogamy in marriage. Those are the sexual deviants. And Kinsey was the model, was engaging in just free sexual expression, just like every single human being he believed should do. The most disturbing part of Kinsey's research was his use and encouragement of pedophiles. This part is disturbing and it's hard to talk about, but people need to understand how Kinsey really formed the bedrock for the mass sexualization of grooming of children that we see today. He tried to normalize pedophilia. Now, the Kinsey Institute will deny that. They've been denying that up and down for years. They'll say, oh, no, he did not encourage any sort of pedophilia. He did not encourage people to take part in these acts. The facts prove the exact opposite. These people are lying through their teeth. Take a look at this soundbite, once again, from this report regarding specifically graphs of table 34.
And I looked at the graphs that he provided, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 tables. And I said, wait a minute, that's a 2-month-old baby. How does he know a 2-month-old baby did or did not have an orgasm? And then table 34, a 4-year-old child. 26 orgasms in 24 hours? That's an around-the-clock experiment.
Wow, that's torture.
That's torture, you bet.
So according to Judith Reisman, Kinsey solicited and encouraged pedophiles, this is a known fact, at home and abroad, to sexually violate from 317 to 2,035 infants and children for his alleged data on normal child sexuality. Many of the crimes against children, oral and anal sodomy, genital intercourse, and manual abuse committed for Kinsey's research are quantified in his own graphs and charts. I want to show you table 34 right now, the notorious table 34, very disturbing. It features 196 children under the age of 12, separates them into different groups. I'm going to read some more from Judith Reisman's description. This is on page 180 of Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, table 34, claims to be a scientific record of multiple orgasm in pre-adolescent males. Here, infants as young as 5 months were timed with a stopwatch for orgasm by Kinsey's technically trained aides, with one 4-year-old tested 24 consecutive hours for an alleged 26 orgasms. Sex educators, pedophiles, and their advocates commonly quote these child data to prove children's need for homosexual, heterosexual, and bisexual satisfaction via safe sex education. These data are also regularly used to prove children are sexual from birth. I have to tell you, it was very difficult for me to research this particular episode. I didn't even want to do it. There were a number of times I thought, I don't want to do this episode. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this episode at all. But I think it's really important that we do it. It's important that we look at this because for exactly the same reasons as Reisman predicted. This is the foundation of why people today, they're using this to justify the sexualization of children. It was absolutely evil. It was diabolical. And yet people continue to promote Kinsey as some sort of hero, some sort of pioneer in sexual liberation when the man was absolutely evil. Among the pedophiles that he employed was a government official working in Arizona, but also, believe it or not, a convicted Nazi pedophile. His name was Fritz von Baluschek. He raped hundreds of children. He was eventually convicted. Okay, he was put on trial after World War II and convicted for murdering a 10-year-old girl. I hope you're enjoying the show. The rest of the show is behind the paywall, so please go to churchmilitant.com to watch the rest. For those who are not premium subscribers, you can sign up at churchmilitant.com/go premium. See you there.